In the lively town of Okuru, everyone knew Nia as the kind-hearted young woman who never said no to anyone. Neighbors would tell stories of how she helped pay for a widow's rent or brought food to a sick friend without expecting anything back. But what people didn't see was what happened behind the closed doors of her family's home. Inside, Nia was treated less like a daughter and more like a servant. No matter how tired she was from work, she was the one who cooked, cleaned, and solved everyone's problems. And yet, she was the one paying most of the bills: electricity, school fees, even groceries. They never said thank you. One evening after another exhausting day, Nia sat in her room thinking about how one-sided her family's love felt. She wondered, did they care about her as a person, or only for what she could give? An idea came to her, sharp and daring. She decided to test them. She would tell them she had lost her job. She wanted to see if they would show her kindness and support, or if their true hearts would show. She took a deep breath, knowing this lie might change everything. Dinner that night was the usual noise of clinking spoons, loud chewing, and half-finished conversations. The smell of spicy jollof rice filled the air, but Nia could hardly taste it. Her mind kept repeating the words she had decided to say. Her hands were trembling under the table, but she kept her face calm. She knew this moment would tell her everything she needed to know. She waited until the chatter died down. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "I lost my job today." For a brief moment everything stopped. Her younger cousin's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. Her aunt's eyes darted to her mother. Her brother raised his eyebrows. The silence was thick enough to cut. Nia's heart raced. She thought maybe they would finally show her the care she had been craving. But then she saw it. A small smirk curl on her cousin's lips. A slow, almost relieved exhale from her mother. Her aunt leaned back in her chair and muttered, "Well, at least now you'll finally be useful around the house." Nia blinked. She didn't understand at first. Useful? Hadn't she been paying most of the bills? Keeping this house running? Her brother chuckled under his breath and shook his head. "Guess you'll have more free time now," he said, not even looking at her. Not one person asked if she was okay. Not one person offered help or comfort. No, what happened? No, don't worry, we'll get through this together. Just cold stares, hidden smiles, and the unspoken feeling that they were glad she had fallen. Nia forced herself to swallow her food, even though her throat felt tight. She kept her head down so they wouldn't see the hurt in her eyes. Inside, her heart was sinking. This wasn't just a test anymore. This was the truth showing itself, raw and ugly, right in front of her. Nia sat there, her spoon moving slowly through the rice, but she wasn't really eating anymore. She could feel eyes on her, not with pity, but with a strange satisfaction, like they were enjoying this moment. Her cousin, barely 19, leaned back in his chair and let out a little snicker, as if her struggle was some kind of joke. She didn't look up, but she heard it. It was the kind of laugh that says, "You deserve this." Her aunt, who had never once offered to help Nia with anything, muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "So now you'll finally be useful at home." The words were like tiny knives, sharp and casual, as if she was talking about a broken tool that could finally serve a purpose. No one asked her what happened. No one wondered if she was scared about money or rent. There was no warm hug, no reassuring, "We're here for you." Instead, the air filled with quiet whispers like a slow-moving poison. Her brother leaned toward her uncle, mumbling something that made them both chuckle. Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line, but not out of worry. More like she was calculating how much extra work she could get from Nia now. Nia kept her head down, forcing herself to swallow the lump in her throat. The clinking of plates felt louder, the smell of food stronger, and yet she felt completely alone in that crowded dining room. It hit her in that moment. Her worth in this house had never been about love. It had been about what she could provide. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the words stayed locked inside. She knew that even if she told them the truth, that she still had her job, it wouldn't matter. Their reactions had already told her everything. And as the whispers and smirks went on around her, she realized she was no longer hurt because of the lies she told. She was hurt because the mask had finally fallen off, and she didn't like what she saw underneath. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Nia heard her mother's voice calling from the courtyard. There was no "good morning," no gentle tone, just orders. "Nia, take all the clothes outside and wash them. By hand. All of them." Nia stepped out to see 2 large baskets overflowing with dirty laundry. Shirts, trousers, bedsheets, even heavy blankets. It looked like the washing of an entire month. She hesitated for a moment, still groggy from sleep, but her mother's sharp gaze told her she had no choice. "Since you're not working now, you can at least keep this house in order," she said flatly. Before Nia could even start, her uncle strolled in, smelling of strong cologne. "Ah, perfect timing," he said, grinning. "We're having some friends over later. About 20 people. You'll cook." His tone wasn't a request, it was an order, like she was a maid in a hotel kitchen. Nia blinked. 20? By myself. "You're free now," he shrugged, as if she had taken a long holiday. "You have the time." The word stung. Free. As if losing a job, pretending to lose it in her case, meant she owed them her entire body and time. They didn't see unemployment as stress, as uncertainty, as something heavy. To them it was an opportunity to use her even more. All day she moved from one exhausting chore to the next, washing clothes until her fingers wrinkled and her back ached, bending over the smoky fire, cooking pots of rice and meat stew for people she didn't even know. The smell of onions burned her eyes, but she didn't complain. She bit her tongue, storing every bitter word in her heart. By evening she was drenched in sweat, her muscles sore. Not a single person thanked her. Not one asked if she had eaten. They laughed and ate at the table while she cleared the plates in silence, realizing with painful clarity, this house didn't see her as family anymore. They saw her as labor. And they weren't even ashamed. It was late at night, and the house was quiet except for the faint chirping of crickets outside. Nia couldn't sleep. Her body was tired from the endless chores, but her mind wouldn't rest. She stepped out of her room to get some water, moving quietly so she wouldn't wake anyone. As she passed by the open window facing the courtyard, she heard voices, low but sharp enough to catch her attention. Her brother's voice came first. "She thought she was better than us," he said with a sneer that Nia could almost hear in his tone. "Now she's nothing." Her chest tightened. She froze in place, her hand still on the doorknob. Her aunt let out a short laugh. "Serves her right. Always walking around like she's some big madam because she works in the city. Now look, no job, no importance." They spoke as if she wasn't inside the same house, as if she couldn't hear them. Each word felt like it was being carved into her heart. Her mother's voice joined in, calm but cutting. "This will humble her. Maybe now she'll remember where she comes from." Nia felt something break inside her at that moment. She had given so much money, time, energy without ever asking for anything in return. And yet, the second they believed she had nothing to give, they treated her like she was worthless. She stood there in the dim hallway, the cool night breeze brushing her face through the open window. But instead of feeling refreshed, she felt cold all over. Those words didn't just hurt, they confirmed her deepest fear. She had never been loved for who she was. She had only been valued for what she could provide. Silently, she walked back to her room, closing the door without a sound. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her eyes burning. That night, she didn't cry loudly. She just let the tears slip quietly into her pillow, each drop carrying the weight of betrayal she could never unhear. Nia sat on the edge of her bed, the dim light from the small lantern casting soft shadows on the walls. The house was silent now, everyone asleep, but her chest felt heavy with the words she had overheard. She hadn't really lost her job, and yet she felt more broken than if she had. She pressed her hands against her face, trying to hold the tears back, but they came anyway, slow and quiet, slipping down her cheeks like they didn't want to be heard. It wasn't the fake job loss that hurt her. It was the truth she had uncovered. Her value in this family existed only when she was giving, paying, doing. Without that, she was nothing to them. She thought about all the years she had worked late nights just to make sure there was food on the table and the electricity stayed on. She remembered the countless sacrifices, turning down outings with friends, wearing the same shoes for 3 years, skipping meals, so that her family wouldn't lack anything. And still, the moment they believed she had nothing left to give, they treated her like she was a burden. Her pillow grew damp beneath her cheek as she lay down, staring at the cracked ceiling. She tried to tell herself she shouldn't care, that their opinion didn't matter, but it did. These were the people who had raised her, the people she had trusted the most. Realizing their love was conditional felt like losing the ground beneath her feet. In the stillness of the night, she made no sound. Her pain was silent, but it filled the room like a thick fog. She knew she couldn't go on like this forever. Something inside her whispered that a change was coming. But for now she just let herself grieve. Not for a lost job, but for a family she now realized she had never truly had. What her family didn't know was that for the past 8 months, Nia had been quietly putting money aside. Every payday, after paying the bills and buying groceries, she would slip a small portion into a hidden envelope tucked deep inside an old shoebox under her bed. It wasn't much at first, just a few notes here and there, but over time the pile had grown. She told no one, not even her closest friend at work. This was her safety net, her escape plan. The money was enough now to rent a small place of her own, maybe even furnish it modestly. She could leave any time she wanted. But Nia hadn't left yet. She had been holding on, giving her family the benefit of the doubt, hoping that deep down, they loved her for more than her financial help. This fake job loss had been her final test, the moment she would see their true faces without the mask. And now she had her answer. Every cruel demand, every smirk, every whisper behind her back had confirmed what she had feared all along. Their love came with conditions. It hurt more than she expected. She had imagined this moment in her head before, but reality was harsher. It wasn't just about leaving a house. It was about leaving the people who should have been her safe place, but instead had become the source of her deepest hurt. That night, as she lay in bed, she reached under and pulled out the old shoe box. She opened it slowly, running her fingers over the neat stacks of bills. For the first time in weeks, a small sense of relief washed over her. She wasn't trapped. She had the means to walk away. And now, after everything she had seen and heard, she knew she would. That weekend, Nia woke up with a clear mind. The heaviness in her chest was still there, but it was mixed with something new: determination. She waited until the house was empty, knowing her family had gone to a wedding in the next town. The moment the front gate closed behind them, she locked the door and stood in the middle of her room, looking around at the life she had lived here. She pulled out the old shoe box from under her bed, the one holding her hidden savings, and set it on the table. Then she opened her small wardrobe and began folding her clothes neatly, one by one, placing them into a worn travel bag. She packed only what mattered: her important documents, her work laptop, a few favorite dresses, and a small framed photo of herself as a little girl, back when she still believed this house was her home. Every sound in the empty house felt louder: the zip of her bag, the rustle of paper, the creak of the floor. But she didn't stop. This wasn't just packing. It was reclaiming her life. When she was done, she walked to the dining table and took out a plain sheet of paper. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote the words that had been sitting in her heart since the night she overheard their whispers. I didn't lose my job. I lost my respect for this house. She placed the note in the center of the table, weighed down with a small glass so it wouldn't blow away. Then she took one last slow look around. The walls that had heard her laughter and her tears, the rooms where she had worked, cooked, and sacrificed. Finally, she stepped outside, locked the door behind her, and walked toward the street without looking back. The sun was bright, the air warm. For the first time in a long time, she felt the faint taste of freedom. Nia's new apartment in the city of Mubiko wasn't big, but to her it felt like a palace. It was a one-bedroom space on the second floor of a quiet building, with large windows that let in warm sunlight every morning. The moment she stepped inside, she knew this was hers. No one could order her around here. No one could slam a door in her face or whisper behind her back. Every inch of this place belonged to her, and the silence was not cold, it was peaceful. She took her time unpacking, turning the empty rooms into something alive. She bought bright curtains in shades of gold and coral, colors that made the whole space feel like sunshine. She laid down a soft rug by her bed, one that felt warm under her bare feet. On the small balcony, she placed pots of fresh flowers, roses, hibiscus, and little daisies, so every time she looked outside, she would see life blooming. In the evenings, she would make herself a cup of tea, sit by the window, and watch the city lights sparkle in the distance. The streets below were filled with gentle noises: children laughing, a street vendor calling out his last sales, music drifting from a nearby cafe. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was the sound of a world moving at its own pace, while she finally had the chance to breathe. There were no piles of dirty laundry waiting for her, no one calling her name to demand more work. Here she decided what she wanted to do with her time. Here her worth wasn't measured by how much she could give. It was simply hers by being alive. And for the first time in years, when she locked her door at night, She felt not trapped but safe. This small apartment wasn't just a home. It was the first chapter of the life she had always deserved. It didn't take long for the news to reach Okuru. One of Nia's former neighbors spotted her in Mubiko, dressed smartly in her work clothes, stepping out of an office building with a confident smile. By the next day, the whispers had started, traveling from one family member to another until they reached her mother's house. When they learned the truth, that Nia hadn't lost her job at all, and in fact had been promoted to a better position with a higher salary, the reaction wasn't pride or happiness. It was anger. Her phone began to ring non-stop. First her mother, then her aunt, then cousins she hadn't spoken to in months. The messages came too, long paragraphs accusing her of lying, of abandoning her family, of being too proud now that she was doing well. Some called her selfish. Others said she had shamed the family name by moving out without permission. They didn't mention the nights she cried quietly in her room, or the years she paid their bills. They didn't talk about the cruel words or the endless demands. None of that seemed to matter now. They just wanted her back where they could control her. But Nia didn't pick up the phone. She didn't reply to a single message. She had nothing left to explain. In the past, she would have rushed to defend herself, to prove she wasn't the villain they were painting her to be. But now she knew the truth. People who truly love you don't need you to justify your happiness. She put her phone on silent and placed it in a drawer. Then she made herself a cup of tea, opened her balcony door, and let the cool evening breeze wash over her. She wasn't running anymore and she wasn't hiding either. She was simply free. And that, she decided, didn't need an explanation. With her new life in Mubiko, Nia found herself with more time and emotional space than she'd ever had before. No one was pulling her in 10 different directions. No one was draining her energy with endless demands. For the first time in years, she could choose where to put her heart. One afternoon, while walking through the neighborhood, she passed a small women's center. Through the open door, she heard the sound of laughter and soft conversation. A notice board outside read, "Volunteers needed, teach skills, build confidence." Nia stopped for a moment, her curiosity pulling her inside. The center was warm and welcoming, filled with women of all ages. Some learning how to sew, others practicing computer skills. She spoke to the coordinator, a gentle woman named Abini, and learned that many of these women had faced struggles similar to hers. Families who didn't value them, workplaces that overlooked them, and a world that often told them they weren't enough. Without hesitation, Nia offered to help. She began teaching classes on writing resumes, preparing for interviews, and speaking with confidence. She shared tips from her own work experience, but she also shared her story, carefully without names, so they would know they weren't alone. Week after week, she watched the women grow braver. She saw the spark in their eyes when they realized they had something valuable to offer. Each smile, each thank you, was like a small light in her own heart. Here, her effort didn't go unnoticed. Here she wasn't used, she was appreciated. And the more she gave to these women, the more she healed herself. Nia realized she didn't need her family's validation anymore. She had found something better, a community that valued her simply for being who she was. Her days no longer felt heavy. They felt bright, like the beginning of something beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, she was excited about the future. Nia never set out to be noticed. She was simply doing what felt right, helping women find their voices and their strength. But one afternoon, while she was finishing a class at the Women's Center, a young journalist walked in. He had been told by a friend about the lady who was changing lives quietly in Mubiko, and wanted to hear her story. First, Nia hesitated. She wasn't used to talking about herself, especially not to strangers. But Abini, the center's coordinator, smiled and said, "Your story could inspire more people than you think." So Nia agreed. They spoke for hours. She told him about teaching women to prepare for jobs, about watching their confidence grow, about the joy of seeing someone believe in themselves for the first time. She didn't talk about the pain of her past in detail, but she hinted at it, enough to show why this work mattered to her so much. A week later, she walked past a street vendor's stand and froze. There on the front page of the Mubiko Daily was her own face, smiling, strong and proud. The headline read, "From Struggle to Strength, One Woman's Mission to Empower Others." She bought a copy and held it in her hands, her heart swelling. It wasn't just about recognition. It was proof that she had turned her pain into something meaningful. But she knew the paper traveled far, and it wouldn't be long before it reached Okuru. And she was right. Within days, her cousin posted the article in the family group chat. She could imagine their faces as they read about her success, not as the burden they once mocked, but as a woman respected by an entire city. Nia didn't call them, didn't explain, didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The smile on that front page said everything she had been waiting to say for years, without a single word. Months passed, and life in Mubiko settled into a peaceful rhythm for Nia. She was coming home from the women's center one Saturday afternoon when she heard a soft knock at her door. When she opened it, she froze. Standing there was her mother. She looked different, smaller somehow, her shoulders not as straight, her eyes carrying a tired sadness. She wasn't dressed in her usual bold prints, just a plain wrapper and headscarf. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with all the unspoken words of the past months. Finally, her mother's voice broke the silence. It was quiet, almost fragile. "I didn't know we hurt you that much," she said, her eyes glancing down at the floor. Nia's heart tightened, but her face stayed calm. She thought about the nights she cried alone, the words she overheard in the courtyard, the years of being treated like a tool instead of a daughter. She wasn't angry anymore, not in the way she used to be, but she wasn't ready to pretend it hadn't happened either. "I hope you learn from it," Nia replied, her tone steady but not cruel. She wanted her mother to understand that forgiveness didn't erase the lesson. Her mother's eyes shimmered for a moment, as if she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded slightly and stepped back. "I just wanted to see you," she murmured before turning to leave. Nia closed the door gently, leaning against it for a moment. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. This time there was no shaking, no urge to defend herself, no desperate need for her mother's approval. She realized that the power her family once had over her was gone. She had reclaimed it, and nothing, not even a surprise visit, could take it away again. Nia learned quickly that freedom wasn't just about moving out, it was about keeping her boundaries strong. She didn't cut her family off completely, but she made a promise to herself. She would only visit when she wanted to, and she would leave the moment she felt the old patterns creeping back. The first time she returned to Okuru, it was for a cousin's wedding. She arrived late, sat where she chose, and left before anyone could hand her a plate and expect her to serve. She greeted everyone politely, smiled when necessary, but didn't stay long enough to be pulled into chores or gossip. It felt strange at first, walking away without guilt but also powerful. Back in Mubiko, her days felt light. She woke up without the weight of someone calling her name to do a task. She cooked when she wanted, not because someone ordered her to. She spent weekends exploring small markets, reading in cafes, or tending to her flowers on the balcony. Every moment felt like a quiet rebellion against the life she had once lived. Her phone still buzzed occasionally with messages from family, sometimes warm, sometimes loaded with guilt. But she no longer felt that old urge to drop everything and run to please them. She replied when she chose to, and sometimes she didn't reply at all. Nia realized she could love her family without sacrificing herself. She could show up for them in ways that didn't break her spirit. The distance gave her room to breathe, to think, to grow into someone she was proud of. And with each passing month, the fear of losing them faded. Because she understood now, she hadn't lost them. She had simply lost the version of herself that believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. And that loss was her greatest gain. In Mubiko, Nia's story is told quietly but with deep respect. Young women talk about how she walked away from a house that drained her spirit and built a life where she could breathe again. They admire the way she chose herself, even when it meant leaving the people she once thought would always protect her. She never pretends it was easy. She tells them that leaving hurt, that there were nights when she cried and questioned everything. But she also tells them about the peace that came after. The morning she woke up without fear, the freedom of making choices for herself, the joy of being valued for who she was, not just for what she could give. Nia often shares one line that has stayed in many hearts. If the table is serving you poison, it doesn't matter who's sitting there. It's still poison. She says it softly, but it lands like truth every time. Her courage has inspired others to think differently about love, family, and self-worth. Some have followed her path, others are still gathering strength, but all agree. Nia showed them that real love should never feel like a prison. And as she waters the flowers on her balcony each morning, Nia knows she made the right choice. She didn't just leave a house. She left behind the belief that her worth had to be earned. Now she lives in the freedom she fought for, and that is the real lesson of her story.